Good morning, everyone. It's fantastic to be back here in Swindon, a place with a very dynamic and innovative local business community, and a place with an excellent parliamentary candidate who again will make a superb MP for this area if elected on the 7th of May. Now, look, David Cameron has spent the first part of this general election campaign telling you why you shouldn't vote for the other lot. Ed and here are here to tell you why you should vote Labour and the difference we will make not only to Swindon but to this country. We are absolutely clear as a party that we are a wonderful, dynamic country with huge potential. But unless we unlock the potential of this country, we are not going to stay true to our history of being a great trading nation going forward into the future. So we've got to reform our economy. And our approach is, first of all, if we are a party of jobs, the clue is in the name, we are the Labour Party, you've got to back the businesses that create those jobs that we want to see more of in our economy. And if you claim to be a party that is pro-business, you cannot go around beating up the people who work in the businesses and make them what they are. So it's a pro-worker, pro-jobs, pro-business agenda. And as Anne said, we are going to back our businesses by ensuring we have a fair taxation regime, and that means we've got to deal with the way in which our businesses have been clobbered by the business rate hikes we have seen during this government's time in office, and that's why we're going to cut and freeze business rates. We need to make sure that if you've got a great idea, you can get access to the finance that you need to start up a business and then expand and grow. And that's why, as Anne said, we're going to set up a British investment bank. And look, if you're a small business with large customers, we think you deserve to be paid on time. We have a scandalous situation in our country where large customers of our small businesses do not pay them on time. Our small businesses, therefore, are in effect bankrolling the larger businesses in this country. We're going to put a stop to that. And of course, as I said at the start about being a great trading nation, we need to make sure that we help more of our businesses. I've seen some fantastic businesses here in Swindon already export into our nearest and biggest market, which is the EU, and that's of course the key that unlocks the door for them to get into these emerging market economies. And that's why we are determined to maintain the UK's membership of the European Union. Now that's how we help our businesses, but we've got to make sure we've got a fair deal for the people who work within them. And that's why we want to see more businesses doing what people like Brompton Bicycles, like Asda and other great businesses are doing, not using exploitative 0 hours contracts. So we're going to get rid of them. We also want to make sure that if you work hard, you see the rewards. And we think you deserve to be paid a wage that you can live off. And that's why we're going to put in place incentives to help our businesses pay a living wage to the people who work in their businesses and make them what they are. And finally, we want to help more people actually work. And we need to help them with childcare to do that. And that's why we're going to extend the amount of free childcare for the parents of 3- and 4-year-olds up to 25 hours. But I'll just conclude by saying this before handing over to Ed. What this election is about is the future. The reason that it's so important to support our businesses, particularly our small businesses that create almost 2/3 of private sector jobs, is that ultimately these are the guys that help us ensure that the next generation do better than the last. And the Labour Party is about nothing if it is not about securing the future for all of our young people in this country, and we're determined to do that. On that note, I'm going to hand over to Ed Ball.
Thank you very much indeed to Chuka and to Anne. And this is an important day, a day in which we're going to be setting out a change that we'll make in the coming months to help small businesses, but also a difficult day because today is the day, despite the campaigning that Alan Snellgrove has done over recent months. Today is the day that 7 children's centres, one of the proudest achievements of the last Labour government, 3,500 children's centres to give all children the best start in life, 7 being closed today here in Swindon, a decision taken locally by the Tory council, and if we want to make sure that all children have the best start in life, and we want to make sure that we have a genuine fairness for the people of Swindon, then we need to re-elect the fabulous Anne Snellgrove as the MP and start to turn things around here in Swindon, and that's what we're determined to do, Anne. We're facing a big choice in the coming weeks in this general election. It's the closest general election for very many years. I think it's the most important general election. And the choice is this. We have David Cameron and George Osborne saying, let's carry on as we are. Let's stick to the plan. They're telling people, you've never had it so good, just let us get on with the job. This is a government which has presided over 5 years when wages have not kept pace with rising prices and family bills. This is a government which has failed to balance the books despite their promises. This is a government which is now presiding over a National Health Service clearly going backwards all the time with rising pressures. I have to say, if that is as good as it gets, then we need change and a better future for our country. If George Osborne and David Cameron want to spend the next 6 weeks going around telling people you're better off, well, we say bring it on, because working people are really struggling in our country and we can do better than this. And what did they confirm in the budget just a few weeks ago? They confirmed, because they failed to balance the books, the Office for Budget Responsibility said they would have to have a sharp acceleration in spending cuts, even deeper spending cuts in the next 3 years than we've seen in the last 5. Even deeper cuts to our police, to the defence of our country, cuts which in the end will mean cuts to our National Health Service and another rise as night follows day in VAT from the Tories. And we can do better than that as well. And that is why the choice is carrying on with David Cameron and George Osborne or Labour's better plan. And look, we're going to have to make tough decisions to cut the deficit every year, to balance the books. We've said we'll have to have some spending cuts outside our protected areas. But we can do things in a different way, a more balanced way. We can make sure that those with the broader shoulders do play a greater part in helping us get the deficit down. That's why we'll put the top rate of income tax back up to 50p for people earning over £150,000. It's why the focus Chuka talked about on raising the minimum wage and delivering more apprenticeships and more good jobs is vital to bringing in the tax revenues to get the deficit down. And it's also why, in a manifesto which we will set out, in which every promise is paid for and costed, no unfunded promises like in the Tory manifesto, we can show that we can pay for an increase in free childcare to 25 hours for working parents. We can pay for a jobs guarantee for young people and an apprenticeship guarantee so that all of our young people can get the skills they need. We can pay for a cut in tuition fees from 9,000 to 6,000. We can pay for 20,000 more nurses, 8,000 more GPs, 3,000 more midwives, 5,000 more workers in the community helping people stay out of hospital by having a mansion tax on properties over £2 million and our levy on the tobacco companies. Everything in our manifesto costed and paid for, and it's also why we can set out changes which will help businesses, and in particular here in Swindon, small businesses grow and prosper. We were setting out our business manifesto yesterday, Ed Miliband, Chuka and I. We were talking about the ways in which we can back companies to create more good jobs, make more profits, reinvest them for the long term, and therefore be able to pay working people better wages to do those tasks. We said we are going to reform Europe, but not turn away from Europe. We're going to devolve power and back businesses who want to invest for the long term. But we also said that we've got to do more to support small businesses. You've got some great big businesses here, Intel nationwide, but you've also, and of course Honda here in Swindon. But we need to do more to back the small businesses in Swindon, which will become the large companies of the future. If you want more good jobs, paying more people to actually be able to pay their way, you've got to back small businesses to expand and grow. And we need to be behind their dynamism and their entrepreneurialism. And that's why, as Anne was saying earlier, we will have a British investment bank to support lending for small businesses. We will make sure we get more competition into banking. We'll tackle, as Chuka said, the issue of late payment, which is such a challenge for very many small businesses. We'll keep what we called for and what the government's done on national insurance support, but we'll set out a roadmap for capital allowances, which will help small companies to invest and to grow. And we're also going to make a further choice in the coming weeks. Over the last 5 years, the Conservatives have spent £7 billion cutting the main rate of corporation tax. We've supported cuts in the main rate of corporation tax. We've said in a document that Shabana Mahmood and I published last year that we wanted to keep our overall main corporation tax the most competitive in the G7. And we set out proposals for large companies and today for small companies to make the tax system work in a fairer and simpler and more long-term way. But what figures also show is that while the main corporation tax cut has cost £7 billion, a tax cut for large businesses, the rise in small businesses, business rates since 2010 has actually gone up by £3 billion. That is an average cost of £1,500 a year for a small company. And we've got a choice to make because the government is proposing from tomorrow to have a further cut in the main corporation tax rate from 20p down to 20p. And we don't think going that next step is the right priority today. At a time when small companies have had such a difficult time, it's not right to go ahead with a further cut for large companies when we can instead use the money in a better way to help us create more good jobs by backing small companies. That's why we're saying, instead of going ahead with a further cut in the large corporation tax rate, we'll keep it at 21p, still the lowest rate in the G7, and use the money instead to cut and then freeze for a second year business rates for small companies. That would mean an average saving of £400 a year for small companies. This is going to help 1.5 million small companies across all of England. Here in the southwest, 181,000 businesses will benefit from this. In Swindon, 6,000 small companies who need help with high business rates and who want to expand and grow will get a tax cut from Labour if we win the election in just a few weeks' time. The figures show 17 businesses will benefit from our tax cut for every one business which benefits from the Tory cut in corporation tax rate. And right now, when we need to help small businesses, it's better to use that money to help 17 small businesses for everyone who'd be helped by the Tory tax cut, and that's what we're going to do. I hope that's the beginning of what we do. I would like to look harder at what we can do in the long term for business rates, but when it comes to future budgets from Labour, the first port of call for us in helping business will be to find other ways, new ways, more ways to cut taxes for small businesses so that we can help them grow, expand and create more jobs. In the end, this is the choice. Do you stick with a plan which is not working for small business and which is not working for the jobs and the wages and living standards of working people, or do you adopt a Labour plan which will cut taxes for small businesses, which will introduce competition, which will tackle late payment, cut out unnecessary regulation and boost lending to small businesses who want to work to create more good jobs? That is a choice which is going to be faced in a few weeks' time. We want to unleash the potential of small businesses here in Swindon to grow and expand, and that is what we mean when we talk about a better plan for Britain, for our prosperity, for the future. We want to make sure that we are promoting competition, but we're not going to turn a blind eye to bad practice if it comes along. We're going to support wealth creation, but we're going to make sure that those with the broadest shoulders can make an extra contribution. We're pro-business, but we are not pro-business as usual. We want to change things, build an economy which works for working people, and back the dynamic small businesses of Swindon, England and the United Kingdom so that we can create the good jobs we need for the future. Thank you very much. Now we are, thank you. very happy to take lots of questions, and I think Chuka and Anne are going to come and join me up here, and we will we'll do a triple act, which is one more than a double act. Gentleman here, start.
Alistair Green of Swindon Web TV. You say that you're not going to increase VAT. You say you're not going to increase employees' NI contributions. What about employers' contributions?
Sure. Look, I've said that our plans, which are steady and balanced, which will balance the books and get the national debt falling in the next Parliament, don't involve a rise in VAT or a rise in national insurance, and they won't involve an increase in the basic or higher rates of income tax. Now, we'll set out the details in our manifesto. Clearly, we can't go through every detail of a complex tax system, but we're not planning to raise national insurance.
Is that for both, though?
As I said,
specific, is that both?
As I said, national insurance is not what we're planning to raise. We'll set out the details in our manifesto. Right, gentleman here.
Hello, Jim Grant.
Hi there, Jim.
Leader of the Labour Group of Councillors in Swindon.
Is it a disappointing day with the children's centres closing?
Very disappointed indeed. However, I speak to lots of local businesses in Swindon, and businessmen say that their biggest concern is that we have a low-skilled, low productivity economy at the moment, and the current government seems intent on continuing with a low-paid, low-productivity economy. What high skills and go hand in hand with high productivity? What would a Labour government do to raise those skills and in terms of that productivity?
Well, you're absolutely right to raise this as an issue, and just to remind everybody, the UK, other than Japan, has the lowest rate of productivity in the G7. And there are two things. We've got to get the level of skills up, and we've got to make sure that we have investment in innovation and R&D. On the skills side, we did a huge amount to increase the numbers going into higher education during our time in office. Now, if we are re-elected, we will have an equal focus on ensuring not only that we maintain our leading edge in higher education and make it accessible by reducing tuition fees from £9,000 to £6,000 for undergraduates, but also have an equal focus on the technical and vocational. And we've got to end the snobbery in this country that says if you go and do an apprenticeship, for example, that isn't as of much value to our country as you doing a degree, because they are of equal value. And that's why we're going to boost the numbers of apprenticeships by requiring all large companies that take on government contracts to provide apprenticeships. So if you look at HS2, for example, we reckon that could create tens of thousands of new apprenticeships. This is something that the two parties of government have refused to do. But we've also got to make sure that we maintain good quality apprenticeships as well, which is why I've said, and quite controversially in some quarters, that our apprenticeships will be level 3 and above. That's not to say we will do away with level 2 qualifications. Level 2 qualifications are very important in and of themselves and as a stepping stone to level 3 qualifications. But we've got to make sure we don't just have some arms race on the numbers of apprenticeships, but that they are of good quality, moving towards a German model, I suppose, in that sense. And of course, in science and innovation, we've got to make sure that we put investment in science and innovation on a long-term framework, which Ed has said, as our Shadow Chancellor, that we will do if we are elected on the 7th of May.
Great. Thank you very much indeed. Gentleman here.
Easy, all right. I'm a young lad, 25. I voted once before. I'm going to vote again, and I'm almost with you. Why should I vote for you, mate? I'm on minimum wage as well. I work in the accountants down the road,
Sure.
so I've come here for work purposes. I've recorded it to show me boss. It's only supposed to be here 20 minutes, you come late. But, why should I vote for you, Ed? Well, not you, well, and your man, Ed. With you. Why should I do it?
In the end, it's a choice of what kind of economy you want. The government say the economy is doing well, but for most people, it's not great at all. As I said, the wages have not been keeping pace with prices. People are being really challenged. Working people are worse off than they were at the time of the last election. And what the government did was increase VAT while they cut taxes for people earning over £150,000. They've refused to act on energy prices, even though they know there's a problem. We've said repeat the bank bonus tax and guarantee jobs for young people, and they've not done that. We say you can only have an economy which works well for Britain if it's working well for people like you. And if you've got a chance to get beyond a minimum wage, to get the skills you need, if you can get a good job in a company which can afford to pay you more, if we can get an economy which is investing more, if we can get an economy where When we're cutting taxes, we're trying to cut taxes for most people rather than those on the highest incomes, then that actually not only works better for you, but it works better for the whole of the United Kingdom. So that's the choice. We say you can't judge economic success by how well a few people on the highest incomes are doing. If you're doing well, Britain's doing well, and we'll try and make sure that you're doing well, and that's what we're about because we're the Labour Party.
Is it all about money? All you're saying is economics, this, that and the other. Is there other things you want to sort out as well? Sure. Is it just purely a financial
Do you mean in
thing?
terms of your personal situation or
No,
more
no,
broadly
no, I'm
society?
just talking about society.
Yeah.
There's a lot of problems out there.
Yeah, totally.
And I think you're focusing a lot on the monetary stuff. We don't care about money. We need it to live, unfortunately. You told us we need it to live. It's not
I'm
you,
with you.
collective.
I'm with you though, but I think,
What are
look,
you going to do about people getting stabbed up? What are you going to do about people, underage girls getting in trouble? What are you doing about this?
we've just gone through 5 years where every year wages are not kept pace with prices and people are worse off. And I don't make any apology for the fact that for very many people in our country at the moment, struggling each week to pay the bills, to make ends meet, is a huge issue. The reason why there's many more working people going to food banks is they can't make the sums add up. And if you've got a society where people are under real pressure, then it's a less good society, not only in terms of people's living standards, but more widely. If we've got more people working and can afford to pay tax because they're better off, that helps us to invest in more police officers to keep the streets safe and more lights in the park so people are safe walking home at night. It helps us to keep the Sure Start children's centres open. It helps to make sure that the National Health Service is properly funded so that people can get the health care they need. And if you live in a society where people's living standards are under pressure, the deficit's huge and things aren't getting better, that makes it harder to have those other things which are really important for quality of life. Now, there's some things which we want to do, for example, to make sure that we keep supporting poor people around the world through international development, or to make sure that we tackle the issue of climate change. Those aren't things which are going to affect our living standards this year or next year, but taking a 50-year view, they're still really, really important and they're morally right. But at its core at this election, the question is, who's going to make most people better off? And the Tories will make some people on high incomes better off, but they're not going to help you, I'd say. At the back there, Sophie.
Sophie Ridge, Sky News. You talk about the need to balance the books. Other than the top rate of income tax, could you be straight with people and spell out exactly what you are prepared to do when it comes to spending cuts and tax rises in order to pay down the deficit? Well,
the difference between George Osborne and me is, first of all, he's got an extreme plan which goes well beyond balancing the books. He wants to have a surplus on the overall budget, and we think that balancing the current budget, getting that into surplus and getting the national debt falling is the right approach. Secondly, he wants to do it faster, and I think we should do it as quickly as we can, but definitely by the end of the next Parliament. And George Osborne says he's going to do it all through cuts to public spending and welfare. Although he can't tell us what he's going to cut in welfare, we say, yes, there are going to have to be cuts, sensible cuts to unprotected areas, and we've gone through a number of areas. For example, the abolition of the police and crime commissioners, savings in police procurement, savings in local government procurement, things which we can do to stop the late payment of housing benefit, which costs us money, things which we can do to make savings in defence procurement, a whole range of areas in our zero-based review. We've also said we'll put the top rate up to 50p for earnings over 150,000, and we'll take the winter allowance away from the richest pensioners with pensioners over £42,000. We'll cap our benefit at 1%. Everything which we've said we'll do is paid for, so there'll also be the mansion tax, there'll also be the rise in the bank levy and bank bonus tax. But the third leg is, he's failed, George Osborne's failed on the deficit because he's not got the incomes in from people working because their living standards are squeezed. And therefore what we're talking about on the minimum wage and the living wage, the apprenticeship guarantee, on the business investment bank, those are all things which are necessary to create more good jobs. And across those range of areas, that's what we're going to do. It doesn't require a rise in VAT or an increase in national insurance. It doesn't require those things because actually working people are paying £1,000, more than £1,000 more in tax than in 2010. We think we can do this without having to ask working people to pay more, because we can do it by asking those with the broader shoulders on high incomes to do so, plus the sensible spending cuts and that growth and jobs agenda. Now, David Cameron's got a real problem because he's promised £10,000 of tax cuts. He can't tell us where the money's going to come from. He's promised 12 billion of welfare cuts. Can't tell us where he's going to cut. He knows he's got deep cuts in public spending, and he can't tell us what that means for police and defence. So he's lashing out. He's using Downing Street to make allegations yesterday, which the Institute for Fiscal Studies made clear didn't add up. It was just nonsense.
So no other specific tax rises then, other than
that was the longest and most specific answer you'll get from any politician in this election campaign. And if you want, I mean, and that was a short version. If you want the longer one, I'll see you afterwards. Is that right? Gentleman there.
Hi, Dave Clark. You spoke about challenger banks earlier on. We've seen recently TSB floated out of Lloyd's. How do you stop your support for things like that immediately being swallowed up by larger banks, like is happening now with TSB?
I'm going to ask Chuka to talk about the Business Investment Bank, the British Investment Bank. Just first of all, we're asking the Competition and Markets Authority to look hard at this issue. We called for this a year and a half ago, and the Independent Competition and Markets Authority then launched a report. They say there's a problem of competition in retail, in consumer and in business banking. And I think everybody wants to see more challengers come in and grow and have more competition and expand. One of the ways which we are going to try and avoid the problem you're raising is we are asking the CMA to look at setting a threshold. So if any individual bank becomes higher than that threshold, that would then trigger another investigation. It doesn't mean that large banks are necessarily a problem and anti-competitive, but it's something that the competition authorities have always got to be looking at. And getting more competition into banking is one way to help small businesses get the support they need, but we don't think it's sufficient.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a situation where you've got lending to almost 5 million businesses dominated by 4 banks. And it's far too concentrated, and that's why we want to see more challenger banks. It's good that we're already seeing some, actually. Aldermore, Handelsbank, Metro Bank, all very good. But it isn't just a question of the number of banks that there are. It's also the culture within them too. Are they actually investing in staff locally who understand the local economy? Going back to that relationship banking model that we had some time ago, too often, if you're a small business in particular, you'll go to your local branch and then you'll be put in a room and put on a phone to somebody several hundred miles away who doesn't know Swindon or wherever else it might be. So that's important. But the rationale for having our British Investment Bank is, frankly, until very recently, we were the only country in the G7 which didn't have state-backed investment institutions to plug the gap where there is a market failure in terms of how the banking system serves your businesses. The last thing I'd just say about this, it isn't just about bank and debt finance. We also need to make equity more of an attractive proposition for many of our small businesses, and also give fuel and help boost the alternative financing market. There's some really interesting players in that, like Funding Circle, for example. So there isn't like one panacea thing that you do which solves the whole problem. You need to do a suite of things, and we're determined to do it working with the business community to work out what's best for them.
Right. The lady there? I was just wondering about the gender balance of my question, so therefore I'm so pleased you put your hand up.
Well, I'll try and make it more interesting than just being of the right gender. Sharon Campbell. I own 2 small businesses in the restaurant sector locally. One of which has expanded in the last 6 months with a 60-70% increase in turnover. And
what style of cuisine is it?
Spanish tapas bar and a French bistro.
It's the best Spanish tapas bar in the whole of England. It was voted that, yeah.
Thank you very much, Anne.
All right.
And we do have some of the best customers as well.
I find with Spanish tapas it's easy to do okay, but really hard to do well. Is that right?
Yes, well, we do it very well.
I bet you do.
But we work very hard to do it.
I bet.
And so do our 23 staff, 5 of whom are new jobs in the last 6 months.
Brilliant.
And all of whom take home more than the living wage.
Right.
So, having said that, we do struggle with some things. We've had a 1,000% increase in business rates because we moved to premises which were twice the size. But that's totally disproportionate. And I'd like you not only to look at the level of business rates, but at the system for calculating them, because it's completely skewed by the size and shape of premises and bears no relation, and there is no mechanism for relating it to what the business turnover might be. And I don't know whether it's possible to look at some kind of cap on rates in relation to turnover or some such mechanism. But the other thing that I'm very concerned about, that I've talked to Anne about before, is tax evasion in small businesses. And it is an enormous problem. And I think you have to be in the small business community to understand how it is almost a national sport to avoid paying your tax. It is, I'm sorry to say this, but it is an expectation that you'd rather have cash than not. And actually, I wouldn't rather have the cash, because for every pound I take, I've got to pay a penny to the bank to put it in the bank. So there are disincentives on small businesses to be honest with their turnover, because they need to keep the cash. If they give it to the banks, they have to pay the banks to put it in there. There are disincentives to declaring your turnover because of the 20% you've got to pay on everything you sell. And there are disincentives to growth because of the level at which you become liable to pay the VAT threshold. So all of those things, I think, need looking at.
Sure.
And fundamentally, another issue is the level of VAT on sales of food and drink in the service business. Obviously, if you go to the supermarket, you don't pay VAT. You come to me, you do. So I have to find 20% of everything I charge. And a lot of my customers don't understand why they have to pay me 20% more when they don't have to pay it if they buy the ingredients from the supermarket.
Sure. Okay.
And I think that we are have the highest rate of VAT on food and drink in Europe. Other countries have reduced that VAT with dramatic effects on jobs in the hospitality business, which is one of the fastest growing sectors of business in the country. And I'd very much like to see you look at that and some comment about what you could do.
I mean, being a tapas bar, you won't sell pasties. So,
No, but I do in the bistro.
but you're doing the bistro,
Yes.
so you would have known
And
George Osborne's.
We're selling a new British-made pasties called Cornish pasties.
Oh, very good, very good. Well, I think there's three kind of legs to my answer to your question. First of all, the immediate cut and then freeze in the second year of business rates is a down payment directly intended to give relief to small businesses like you with rateable values less than 50,000, which I'm sure would apply to a restaurant. And as I said, 1.5 million properties in the country. That's immediate help from Labour, because that's better than the large corporation tax rate. Secondly, there are some bigger questions about business rates, and it's partly, as you said, about the anomalies in administration, and that's something we need to look at immediately. There's also some wider issues which probably don't apply to your business, but more generally, if you are a small retailer on the high street selling and competing against online retailers like Amazon, who can do things where they don't have to have a warehouse in the United Kingdom, or the shops on the high street, then there's a non-level playing field there, because you're paying business rates and they're not paying the business rates. And that is a concern for Sainsbury's and Next as much as a small retailer. So there's some bigger questions we need to look at on business rates. And the third point is that it's important that government is open with business about getting regulation right, not having hidden charges and being under pressure on that. But actually for businesses, as you're saying, that's also important when you're dealing with other parts of the world, not just the national government, but also, for example, the banks. And I think one of the things with the CMA review is it needs to look at hidden charges and extra costs, which make it harder for small businesses because of bank decisions where you're doing the right and the legitimate thing. In the end, it's really unfair on small companies playing by the rules and doing the right thing to know that other companies, large or small, are evading their taxes, avoiding or evading their taxes. And that is something which is partly about the tax authorities doing a good job and cracking down, but it's also about making sure that people who are doing the right thing aren't penalised from doing that. And then that's something which I promise you we will have a hard look at as well. And good luck with the two businesses. I'm going to ignore Anne, who's saying that we've run out of time, and do one more question or a couple more. There's a gentleman there and a lady there, and then we're done. Why don't we do both of them together, and then we'll make it the final word.
Derek Montreux, you said very little about the position of Europe in this election.
Right.
The position of Swindon in the 90s was that we had one of the fastest rates of growth in Europe that took place in Swindon. And many national and international companies located in this areas, BMW, you've got Honda, a lot of subsidiary companies, and the impact of even the discussion around the possible withdrawal from Europe would have an impact on the working lives of ordinary working people.
Okay.
And I'll be interested to know what your views are.
We're totally on that. We'll just hear from the lady next to you as well, and then we'll just do...
Yeah, Sam List from the Press Association. Growth figures have been revised up this morning. Is it still credible for you to say the Tories are failing on the economy?
Well, in respect of the first question, you are absolutely right to highlight the importance of our continued membership of the European Union. In fact, when I was last here, Anne and I went to Johnson Matthey, which are producing fuel cells powering cars, and most of the product produced here in Swindon that they produce is export. It would be a complete disaster for us to leave the European Union. And let me be absolutely frank. We made a big call, this Parliament. There were a lot of people who thought that we were just going to dance to the tune of the populist right, allow ourselves to be taken hostage by Nigel Farage, as David Cameron has, for political convenience. But we decided not to do that because we felt that was against the national interest. It is a complete cop-out and a con to suggest that all the problems that we face in Britain are down to the EU and or Eastern European immigrants. That isn't an outrage, and that isn't a true exposition of what the challenges are that face our country. The way forward for us is to work to reform Europe and lead within it. Actually, our European partners want to see us taking more of a leadership role. I thought it was a great shame, for example, when we saw President Hollande and Chancellor Merkel go to Russia and seek to sort out the issue vis-à-vis Ukraine with President Putin, and the British Prime Minister was nowhere to be seen. Our European partners want Britain to be deeply involved, ensuring we reform the European economy, because that is good for British businesses and European businesses, and they want us to play more of a leadership role. Now, that's what we've historically done. And if you looked at Tony Blair and Gordon Brown's time as Prime Minister, we were almost always able to marshal a majority behind the British position. We are determined if we get back in, we're going to do that, not necessarily because it's good for Europe, and it is, but ultimately because it's the best thing for the British people and our businesses.
And then to answer the second question and a bit of both. First of all, this has been the slowest recovery for 100 years. The recovery was set back in 2010 by George Osborne's budgets and spending reviews unnecessarily. It's made it harder to get the deficit down. Small upward revision today in the GDP figures doesn't change that overall record. This has been a disappointing recovery, and it didn't have to be this way. And secondly, if the Conservatives want to go around and say, look, our plans is working, look at the GDP figures, our plan's working, look at the figures on disposable incomes, then we say bring it on. Because the reality is, this is the toughest squeeze on people's living standards in a parliament since the early 1920s. Everybody knows, if you think of conversations Anne has on the doorstep in Swindon, Mark Dempsey has on the doorstep here in Swindon, do people say, I'm feeling better off? 70% of people are saying, well, actually, things are the same or getting worse for people like me. We all know we want a better future, but a better future is not one where the bills are rising faster than the wages, and people's living standards have been really, really squeezed, and that's got to change. And I don't think just crossing your fingers and hoping for the best is good enough. The biggest risk to our economy in the next 5 years is Britain leaving the European Union. There's no doubt about that for jobs and investment. But unless we can show you can have an economy which increases the wages and living standards for most people, then you're going to have people kind of becoming more frustrated, and it's always easier to blame somebody else, and that's why sometimes you get that anti-European sentiment. The solution on Europe is to win the argument not only that being in the European Union brings us more investment and more jobs, but that we've got a plan which can work to raise the living standards of working people. And the choice is, we'll carry on as we are, or have the extra childcare, the job guarantee for young people, the apprenticeship guarantee, the small business tax cut through business rates. That's what we're offering. I think that is a better future for our country. It's a better plan. When I say to people in this room, do you think deeper spending cuts in the next 3 years than in the last 5 years is going to make our economy stronger or weaker? What's the answer? It's definitely weaker. That is the answer. And that is why we need to change. And we've got a big choice coming up in the next few weeks. And I hope that people in Swindon will choose to support Mark and to support Anne. This is a constituency we need to win to have a Labour government. I've worked with Anne before. She was a brilliant MP before, not only standing up for working people and for pensioners, but also for businesses here in Swindon. And we want her to do that again in 6 weeks' time. So thank you to everybody for having us. We really appreciate it. Thank you.